I think I've always been really keen to create training which is based around learning when you need to know something, so learning in the flow of work, rather than what you see in a lot of organizations where they teach everything in these giant structured face-to-face courses, hoping you'll need that information. And the reality is a week later, you've already forgotten everything that you saw in those face-to-face courses.
Wonderful. Right, we'll get into it. So Darren, first of all, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. How are you getting on?
Really good. Yeah, it's been busy. I'm bouncing around different jobs at the moment, but I've got some good stuff I'm working on. So yeah.
Lovely. Well, we're looking forward to getting into the conversation. I get to I class it as like legally stalking people, which that's what I was doing to you last night. You'll be either thrilled or horrified to find out. So good chance for me to kind of go through your background, have a little look at your CV/LinkedIn piece, and it's fascinating for me at least. And we're just looking at the range of different places that you've been and the different topics that you've been involved in, and that content piece is obviously one that pulls through hugely, and one that I think we're really keen to get into, because a lot of the conversation we're having at Titus and having with the rest of the network that we're kind of linked in with, it's regardless of how good the learning management system is, or that tool that houses everything, if the content's not there, then it's kind of like, what's the point in it? So that for us is a really big kind of talking point at the moment, and for everybody else, full stop. But what would be amazing just to kick us off is, are you okay? Just give us a bit of a background in terms of some of the roles that you've done, kind of bring it up to where you're at currently, and then we'll delve into some of the juicy stuff.
Yeah, so I've recently just started working with Primark, and one of the things they do when you start there is to start introducing yourself to every single key stakeholder within the organization, and they have quite a formulated way of getting everyone to kind of get to know each other. It's almost like speed dating. One of the things I've kind of worked out from that is, one, I've been in this industry for a really, really long time. It's over 20 years now that I've been working in learning development. And through that time, I've done everything from teaching people how to install surveillance equipment in Moscow Metro, all the way through to castrating dogs. So it's a really, really broad spectrum of content I've done. I've done a lot of systems training. We've done a lot of product training. I've worked more in the spaces where the training you're creating is training that people have to want to do, as opposed to there's some sort of mandatory management role where someone's pushing people to do it. So if you look at the stuff I've done within Sony, most of the content now was teaching people how to use or get the most out of the products they're working with, or they've purchased, or maybe thinking about purchasing. So you've got to have almost that kind of YouTube mindset in how you get people really interested in the content to start with. You've got to market it pretty heavily, but then you've got to make sure that people kind of get what they want out of that content, and it's nice, short, succinct bursts. So creating lots of micro series of content, creating lots of stuff which really helps people find the answers to what it is they're looking for, has been the primary bit of work that I've done over many of those years. But also doing the onboarding stuff, also doing all of the educational piece. I've done quite a fair bit of stuff with the British Association of Dermatology, who we're doing educational content around how to, diagnose different skin diseases and all sorts of things like that. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, I never get too worried about the subject matter itself. It's around how you build content that's really going to tap into the learners. And exactly like what you said earlier, it's about making sure that the LMS is a really important part of it, making sure that the navigation is good, the usability is really good, people can find what they want. But you've got to make really good content that people want to do, and you've also got to then communicate it really effectively as well, because you can have the best platform and the best content, but if you don't tell anyone about it, no one is going to be able to come to it and experience that content.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think, again, what will be interesting for us to jump into a little bit more there is you've given, and I was surprised that castration came up quite so early in the podcast, and I wasn't expecting it at all, but there you go. It's one of those. But you've done a huge range of different types of content, different subjects, different topics, etc. What would be quite interesting to delve into is what is that common thread across them all in terms of making that content, engaging and accessible. And then again, like you were just talking about there, how do you couple that well with the learning management system and all other tools that you're using within it?
Yeah, so there's kind of a couple of elements to it. The first thing is understanding the learner, and learners are normally motivated by one or two things. So if someone is starting a brand new job, they are going to be like a dry sponge. They're going to be looking at absorbing as much information about the company. That's the time they're going to be interested in learning how the travel system works and how the HR system works and how they book holiday, and having lots of questions about how to operate within that organization, understanding the values, understanding the behaviors. So creating an entire channel of learning, which is very much focused on onboarding people really successfully and helping them really learn everything while they're in that space of wanting to know everything they possibly can. Then realistically, they're not going to be too interested until there's a specific task they need to complete, in which case that's when you start your system training. That's when you start teaching people how to use the procurement systems or the till systems or whatever CRM systems they may be using within an organization. So it then turns into how they start fulfilling certain job role expectations and completing tasks. And then the third element to it is about what do they want to do next. So once they've started with an organization, once they know all the different tasks they've got to complete and they've learned all the new systems that have been launched, the next one is the career development and the career pathways. And that's where you want to start creating lots of really good leaderships and content. That's where you want to start doing lots of great conversations, maybe well-being, maybe resilience. A whole host, a whole kind of library of content can then really help develop people's careers. And you've got to assume that some organizations can be very linear. So within the veterinary world that I've worked in, you would be able to go from a nurse to a head vet nurse and progress through different levels of nursing. Same with being a vet, you do the same. Retail, also very clear. You can go from a retail assistant to an assistant manager to a manager to a general manager. But also you've got to have those kind of wonky careers as well, where people will not necessarily have a natural career progression up into doing their boss's job within an organization. They may need to move sideways, they may need to move diagonally, and creating a load of content which people can just tap into as and when they need stuff or where they feel that their development needs are is really useful.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So I think one of the key points I kind of heard there really was one, yes, certainly about the content and understanding what is the use case for that, whether it's career progression or onboarding or whatever else it might be. But I think it was that timing piece and almost finding the triggers at when to best utilize and roll out that content. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to, first of all, recognizing when people are most susceptible to learning is going to do a lot of the work in communicating to people. Having a really nice page on your LMS that says, here's all our system training and everything from Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Office, Google OneDrive, all the different tools you may use within your organization. Having those there that people can just navigate to straight away because they've got a specific task they need to create. I think I've always been really keen to create training which is based around learning when you need to know something, so learning in the flow of work, rather than what you see in a lot of organizations where they teach everything in these giant structured face-to-face courses, hoping you'll need that information. And the reality is a week later, you've already forgotten everything that you saw in those face-to-face courses. So having a really sensibly designed LMS, which enables you to get in, find the content you want, answer that question you need, deliver that task, whatever it is. A good one at the moment, we're doing a lot of work around setting your goals for next year and reviewing how well you've performed for last year. That's a big piece of work at the moment. So all of the content we have on our LMS at the moment is very much focused around how you do SMART objectives, how you set goals for the future, how you have good conversations with your line manager, how you as a colleague structure that conversation to be able to think about what you want your career to look like, what goals you want to be setting. So that content's being hit heavily at this moment in time because that's a big talking point in the organization. Everyone has to go through that process and all the content's already there ready for them to go on that. So when we launch, you've got to do your annual review. We've made sure all the assets are there ready to go for that. And I think you can look through the course of the year at key milestones, key initiatives the business is going to have, and make sure those assets are there up front. So the second you announce a piece of business change or a certain activity or certain initiative the organization's doing, you've got the supporting content already there. That sometimes relies on the L&D team or whoever's creating the learning content within your organization to be really switched on with what's going on within the business, linking in with the operations side of it, the finance side of it, the technology side of it, to be at the front of creating those assets. Sometimes you get companies which are a little bit late to the party, that they suddenly think of training after they've launched something or after they've already got initiatives. So the timing is really important, but actually knowing the right stakeholders in the business, being really close to those groups, is really, really important.
Brilliant. And would you say that question I was thinking about just as you were chatting there, and I think you were kind of pushing towards it at the end, is how do you best then get that kind of engagement and that culture of learning and development throughout the organisation? So I think it's all well and good saying, here is the budget, here's the time, here's the content, here's the platform. It's well, taking a horse to water, that adage, that's what I'm referring to. And I think it sounds a bit backward, but even for us at Titus, I will say hands up, that L&D piece has been something that we have struggled with over the years to kind of properly implement that. Now, our specialism is understanding our customers' requirements, making sure the software can do absolutely what they need it to do, supporting them on an ongoing basis. And then we are now moving into the realms of things like content, and we've got learning consultants, etc., etc. But even for ourselves as an L&D company, and where we would like to think that L&D is quite at the core of our culture, it can often be an uphill struggle with some of those things. So I think the triggers that you've mentioned previously and getting that timing right, that's an amazing takeaway for us and for everybody else who's listening. But I'm keen just to know a little bit more as well about how you can really embed that culture of learning throughout the organisation. Is that to do with the content? Is it to do with management, comms, etc., etc.? That'd be good just to chat a bit more about.
I think it's a few things. I think you've got to build really strong relationships within the organisation. For a lot of people, training isn't necessarily their first thought within an organisation. You get people which kind of lead change programs, normally because they're a specialist in the thing that they're changing. So if you're launching a brand new, project management tool, they're probably really good on the project management side of things. They probably know how that system works. They're probably less likely to know the triggers that someone needs to kind of really get bought into that. So, for instance, one of the things I had to launch at Medivet was a new kind of till system, client relation management tool. The one they had initially was really clunky, very slow. And we went out to the business and found certain advocates that really wanted to just tell how beneficial the new system was going to be to them. We got amazing quotes. We got people saying it would be all their Christmases in one. They were talking about how slow the existing system was and the just gloom of just watching this spinning wheel constantly going around waiting for something to load. And building all of those stories was center of the training that we did, because before you can get people to really embed in change, you've got to really see the benefits that they're going to get from all of this change. Like, a lot of the time an organization will launch something like that and they'll just think, okay, now I've got to learn something new, I've got to work in completely different ways. Like, it's all of the negative things that they've suddenly got going through their mind all in one go. And actually, before you even push people down the training route, you need a bit of content to really start explaining this is the benefit of all the stuff that's about to happen. And it opens their mind to the training. You need to work really hard. You need to work really hard on those relationships. I think one of the things I've noticed is you've got to demonstrate stuff to people. So for this particular example, we had to do a lot of proof of concepts beforehand. So we had to actually kind of film some things before to say, these are the types of stories we need to be telling from different parts of the business to say, this is why we're changing. And I had to mock up quite a lot of the training material as well, just to show we don't have the capacity to build a huge interactive SCORM piece of learning for every bit of functionality on this system. It's just impossible. The only way we do it is to go externally with agencies, and that would cost thousands and thousands of pounds. So sometimes you've got to kind of balance what the business may think it wants and what it actually really needs isn't good enough. So we created a load of single HTML page articles which talked about every scenario in that till system, every scenario in the CRM system, and explained step by step how you do things. It was done in a way that they could print it if it was a certain thing that they did a lot that they just wanted to tuck under the keyboard. But it was also done in a way that you just saw an image and an instruction, all the way through so they could get straight into it. But we still did all that change culture piece, and we still did all of the instructions. We still did a few little videos that showed, what happens when you click on different things. But we basically looked at what the learner was going to need, and we looked at what time and capacity we have within the organization, and just found the line of best fit.
Brilliant. And it might be good just at this stage as well to talk a little bit around that content type. And I don't mean very specifically, is it a quiz, is it an assignment, is it a video, etc., but the different ways in which content can be prepared and the different use cases for that. I think everyone is naturally leaning towards everything video. I think with the kind of like home working, hybrid working, doing video calls, videos kind of become a bit of a de facto fallback where you can't have that face-to-face. However, that's not always the right tool to use, and it can be very time-consuming, very costly, etc., to produce that. And then obviously if you need to edit things, it can be tricky. So there's a time and a place for all types of content. But what process would you typically go through internally, whether you are deciding yourselves to create a new piece of content or you've got a request from somebody? How do you manage that best in terms of this is the way in which we should deliver it and this is the reason why?
Yeah, again, really good question. I think it depends on a lot of different things. First of all, find out what your users want. So whenever I start with an organization, I'm building one at the moment, actually ask your audience. If you've got 80,000 learners in there, get a survey out to as many of them as you can to see what type of content they would prefer. Do they look for video? Do they want podcasts? Do they want articles to read? We've broken a lot of our pages on OLMS down into something to watch, something to read. Something I think we're trying to sort of roll out a little bit more of that style of content as well, just to give variety. But first of all, find out what your learners want. The second thing is what's the quickest way of them getting the outcome that they're looking for. So I would always say, before you start thinking about, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to make a bit of school content, I'm going to do an assessment, all of this. So what are you trying to achieve with this? If you are trying to achieve someone being able to use a till system or process something or use a particular tool, then them seeing a video or them seeing an article on how to use that tool is enough. From a health and safety piece, for instance, one of the things that your organization may be able to do is look at just doing recurring learning on the assessment to see if someone is still safe and compliant. So for instance, rather than putting them through a whole hour's worth of e-learning of fire safety, where they're clicking on everything and there's lots of interactions all the way through, and then there's an assessment at the end of it, separate them. Look at how you can make the learning piece as small as possible. Actually look at how you can make it so people can jump back into it at different points as well. So don't assume that someone's going to watch something and remember it forever. I think most learning professionals know that no one's going to be able to do that. But then we look at all the compliance training that's out on the market, and it's all designed in that way, that you just subject someone to an hour's worth of training and you force them to an assessment. So I would always design content based on how people are going to get the answers. Think about what we're trying to achieve with that training. If there is a need for assessment, do that completely separate. It is also possible to do a knowledge checker up front. So you could create a bit of an assessment tool that says, here's all the things that we need you to know, and test them on that. And then after that, then you can go into just directing them into the learning that they need to know off the back of that. So if, for instance, some of the things that comes up about maybe values and behaviors, there's something that they're missing on that, you direct them to where that values and behaviors learning is. One of the things I'm hoping to see as AI starts becoming built into more and more learning management systems, I'm hoping that that's going to really start enhancing how people can do assessments. Because at the moment, a lot of assessments are predominantly multiple choice, maybe a bit of drag and drop. When it comes to putting a free-flowing answer in, you've got to basically type it exactly as the person that made that content wrote the answer themselves, which is going to be impossible. People will spell things wrong. You've got dyslexics, different kind of people word things in different ways. You've also got language translations for some organizations. So having kind of AI being able to step in the future and do some of those assessments would be really, really useful, especially if it could then link into where the content is that would help answer that question in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. There's some fascinating videos out on the web, isn't there, at the moment in terms of technology? Have you seen that one where there's a chap and he's sat, the video, he's sat in a restaurant, he's got an earpiece in, and it's like, will you drop that background noise, translate this from Spanish to English, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of proof of concept-y, but in terms of where you're going from how AI can help impact the types of content is absolutely mega. The session we did with Synthesia on one of the other episodes, that was very much about kind of how you can implement it and get AI kicking stuff out the back end of it. And I think one piece I was thinking of a lot there as you were chatting is just that personalized learning element or adaptive learning element, and how much of a part has that played so far? How much do you think that will kind of become an increasing part of what you're offering? Because as you just said it, whether it's from an accessibility perspective or whether it's to do with localization or it's just to do with learning styles and how people best learn, how much has that personalized learning piece come into what you have done and what you think you will do moving forwards?
Yeah, it's a huge part. I'm definitely finding there's more language needs in what I'm working on at the moment. You know, we're working up with 14 different languages, and there's a lot of challenges in how we create content for that. We've got a lot of content that's created out in the markets as well. That all comes into kind of a central LMS. Getting that content to surface to people is probably one of the biggest challenges, and I think you got to really carefully design your homepage and your navigations and the categories of that and how content sits. We've got a few challenges around how we build an environment that enables the center to push out kind of 80% of the training material, but then the local markets have the remaining 20% as to how they implement what they need to do. So creating a kind of learning management system, learning experience, which facilitates those different teams of people all creating their own stuff and bringing together so it doesn't become like a SharePoint dumping ground is really quite crucial. We've done a lot of work in tidying up content in other organizations I've worked on. I think personalization has been something we've been able to achieve with job roles and with various profile information that we get from the HR systems. Turning on certain categories of learning and hiding others. For instance, if you back in my veterinary days, if you were working in IT, the last thing you wanted to see was all the clinical content of all the gory stuff of different operations that were going on. So we made sure that there was a certain level of job-related surfacing of content on that. I think also just making sure that any learning plans you're creating or training programs you're creating has just the content you need and it's as short and as succinct as possible. But then you might create multiple different learning programs for different audiences. So for instance, we had people in practice that were needing certain skills, a little bit more stuff around working with sharps and needles and things. There was a little bit more kind of hazardous stuff that might take place in a branch versus someone working in the office. So depending on your profile would depend on, did you get 5 or 6 pieces in your health and safety learning, or 7 or 8 pieces, or 9 or 10? And we just kind of tailored stuff based on what the needs were and what risks were like to be for those individuals. And that was relatively easy to do. You just need to have a really good integration between your HR system. Hopefully that's got really good data in it, not always, but you're hoping for that. But making sure that you've got that good feed coming into your LMS and you're able to then work with those custom value fields.
Brilliant. So looking to the future, some of that you just kind of covered there as well, but what do you see as perhaps some of the bigger trends and or challenges that we're going to see over the next few years? I mean, if you can answer this without using the letters A or I, I'd be very impressed, but it'd be good just to know about kind of where you think things are going, what you think is kind of the highest priority. And I think it's often good to chat about the challenges, like the success stories and what's kind of been and gone that's worked exceptionally well. That's lovely and it's great to hear. But I think where we can get some really useful stuff as well is looking to the future and what challenges have occurred that we might be looking to overcome, or what things that you think people might struggle with as well moving forwards.
It's a very big question. I think also totally impossible to answer without using AI.
Yeah, that was a bit mean.
Within. I mean, the thing with AI is we're more in danger at the moment of assuming that AI is going to solve every single problem that we've got. And there's still a very fundamental reality of all good training that you produce, that the storytelling has to be really, really good. and the impact that you're looking to have needs to be told within that story. So, for instance, any training program, if it's not educating, informing, or inspiring people to make the change that your organization needs them to make, then your content's not going to be made better with AI. You've just got to design it really well with that storytelling first. But AI will most definitely make life a lot easier if you need to do the translation side of things. They can make it look a little bit more interactive. We're talking avatars. We're seeing lots of authoring tools which will take PowerPoint presentations and just transform that into really pretty little videos that work quite nicely if you're trying to really scale up your content production. So I think you've definitely got a lot of tools on the market. I think be careful about just going out and buying every tool on the market. You can burn your budget really, really quickly, and you're probably not needing to. I reckon there's probably about 3 or 4 off-the-shelf tools that will be perfectly good enough for creating all the different content you're using. If you've got a really well-established content team that does a lot of video work, then obviously you've got your Adobe Creative Cloud suite, but you've now got Canva, you've now got Adobe Express, you've now got lots of web-based tools which will enable you to create really good graphics really quite quickly. There's AI elements within that as well. So if you're trying to use stock footage and you don't have an entire library internally, nowadays you don't even need to buy the stock footage. You can use AI to generate the images. Just make sure you count the number of fingers if you've got people on there, because for some reason fingers seems to be the downfall of AI. When it comes to lots of content you're creating, don't forget there's content providers out there. So you've got companies like In Rehearsal, you've got Litmus, you've got Go One. There's a lot of big content aggregators and content producers out there that you can just tap into. Part of the content strategy I'm working on at the moment is, what do we absolutely need to make ourselves? What can we use an agency for because it's just something we can brief them on easily and they can create? Or maybe do we need to add a little bit of extra flair, so we need some extra agency support for? And what is just perfect for us to go to a LinkedIn Learning or Udemy or something like that and just buy in automatically. So I think the most important thing whenever you're doing your content strategy and looking for what your learning is for the next 3 or 4 years is work out what you can buy in first of all, a decent enough price as well within budget for the organization, and have that as your foundation, your core learning offering. And then you build on top of that with really nice, inspiring stories that's going to help people be better at their jobs, want to stay with your company because they've got really good learning opportunities, helps them be really efficient and simple to work with. But I think AI will help you build that, but you've got to be really good at the storytelling. So the biggest thing for me is making sure you've got really good people to make great content. And they are the people I've hired for that in the past have normally come from marketing backgrounds, not traditional e-learning backgrounds, where you get really good inspirational stories. If you're trying to inspire someone to be the next general manager of your business, then actually you want someone telling their story on camera about how good their experience has been, all the different side steps they made, all the things that they took a risk on and tried to do. Bringing that story to life is really, really important. And sometimes you've got to step away from the instructional designers and come to the people that know how to talk to people.
Yep. Love it. I think that is the perfect place to wrap things up. My question was going to be around if there is one key takeaway from everything we've discussed, and I think you summarised it quite wonderfully there at the end. So yeah, I'd just like to say a massive thank you, Darren, for spending a bit of time with us, sharing some of your knowledge. We might well have to call upon you again at some other point to delve into a few other topics. But yeah, really enjoyed that, and thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. It feels a little bit like a job interview, but at the same time, it's just kind of creative, weird stories that I'm telling.
Yeah, you got the job.